everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is Heidi from My Reading Life, and I'm here today to discuss some recent reads. These are basically all of the fiction books that I haven't yet talked about that I completed in the month of September. So we have 5 books to discuss, so let's just get right to it. I'd like to keep this video a little bit shorter. So the first book I have to talk about is All of a Creation by Ruth Ozeki. This is a book that I buddy read with Joe Smith, and Joe and I have been reading Ruth Ozeki books together this year, and it's been tremendously fun. I have found that I really enjoy Ruth Ozeki's writing style. So in this particular book, we're following Yumi Fuller, who has run away from home at the age of 15 and has now, this is years later, and she's being called back to Idaho by her best friend Cassie because her dad is ill, possibly dying, and her mom has Alzheimer's, and something needs to be done about the family farm. So Yumi's parents are potato farmers in Idaho, and she grew up in this small town called Liberty Falls, I think it was, and she basically just never fit in. Her mom was Japanese, I believe, or is it Japanese? I can't remember, but anyway, basically Yumi was mixed Asian and white American. So she, dealt with that. And this book really is all about confronting your past and how you can't ever really get away from it. Mixed in with that is a discussion of industrial agriculture and GMOs. So there's this group that enters the story called the Seeds of Resistance, and it's a bunch of political activists who ride around in this converted RV that runs on, used fryer-later oil. And they're running around the country protesting the use of GMOs in food and trying to educate people about the risks of that. And their story collides with Yumi's story and Cassie's story in this small town in Idaho. And it's all about, like I said, confronting your past, dealing with family relationships, dealing with friendships, and then this industrial agriculture piece, and basically, humanity and what parts of what things are good about humanity, what things are bad about humanity. There's a wide cast of characters. This book is written with a lot of humor while also dealing with some pretty tough subjects. And I just really think it was awesome. We read My Year of Meats earlier this year, and I also love that one. So if you're interested in fiction that sort of takes on not only interesting narratives about families and things like that, but also deals with environmental issues, I think Ruth Ozeki is a great author to look at. Then I read a romance book called A Rogue of One's Own by Evie Dunmore. This is book 2 in her Suffragettes series. I buddy read this with my romance reader buddies, Doris and Katie, and I really enjoyed this book as well. This is the story of Lucy, who is the leader of a suffragette movement, and her childhood nemesis, Lord Ballantine. And so Lucy has come up with a scheme that she's found some financial backers, and she's going to buy this publishing house, and then she's going to convert the publishing house into producing her suffragette, women equality type pamphlets and books and all of that, and she'll have control over publication of these sort of radical periodicals. Lord Ballantine has his own agenda, and he comes in as basically buys out half of the same publishing house. So now Lucy and Lord Ballantine have to deal with each other as co-owners of this publishing house. And of course it's a romance, so there's backstory between our two main characters, and perhaps all is not as it seems. Maybe they have mistaken each other's intentions and emotions for a long time. I think this is a really good book. I liked it even more than the first book in the series. I thought it was a fun discussion of the issues that faced women and the time period. This book takes place in the late 1800s in England. And, there was, the women were fighting for not only the right to vote, but also the right to own property on their own, aside from their fathers or their husbands. So I think this book addressed a lot of issues about women's equality at the time in a very interesting and engaging way, while also delivering a very satisfying romance in amongst all the other stuff. I then read The Women of Brewster Place by Gloria and Naylor. I buddy read this with Britta, and it was excellent. We picked this up because it was the pick for September for the Barter Horde's Backlist Book Club. And I am so glad that I read this book. I had never read anything by Gloria Naylor before. And The Women of Brewster Place is a collection of interlinked short stories that take place all in this basically slums called Brewster Place. And our main character that we follow is Maddie. So the very first story is like her childhood and her backstory and how she came to Brewster Place. And then the rest of the narratives are all about the women of Brewster Place and how they connect to each other and how they, the women's friendships, mother and daughter relationships, all about women's relationships with each other and with this place. And I thought it was delightful. The writing, Gloria Naylor can tell a story. First of all, the stories are very, easy to read, very engaging and make you want to read them. But then she will have these passages where she describes there's this one passage in particular where she's describing gossip and how people who engage in gossip, it's like having a bad taste in your mouth. And she's talking about how this bad taste can like coat your teeth and coat your tongue and you can't get rid of it. And it was just like perfect, like spot on description, analogy of gossiping and leaving this bad taste in your mouth. And I just thought, this woman who can take some words and put them together and like evoke this feeling or evoke this condition so well. She's just really brilliant. I thought it was really well done. Really super glad that I was brought to read this book by the Barter Horde's Book Club and the Buddy Read with Britta. And I also read it at the same time that I was reading Girl, Woman, Other by Bernadine Evaristo for the BookTube Prize. And I will say that I think Bernadine, excuse me, I don't know why I can't say her name right. Bernadine Evaristo must have been influenced by The Women of Brewster Place. And I would not at all be surprised if Elizabeth Strout was also influenced by Gloria Naylor in her writing of Olive Kitteridge, because I see connections between all three of those books. And just wonderful. Definitely recommend The Women of Brewster Place. I then finished The Institute by Stephen King. And I have had this one on my shelf for a while, but you know that I love Stephen King. And so I always like to have at least one of his books in my TBR pile that is unread. And I need to know that there's another book out there that I can read before I read this one. So When It Bleeds has been published for a while. I haven't got a copy yet, but I will. So I was safe to read The Institute. And then I saw Karen Evans reading. I saw one of her videos where she was reading The Institute, and I was like, yeah, I gotta pick this up. I ended up actually listening to this on audio, and I would definitely recommend this book on audio. It is such it's such a plot heavy book, and it just, it's going so fast that it makes for a wonderful audiobook. So this is the story of our main character is Luke, who is a 12-year-old boy who is kidnapped from his home and brought to this place called the Institute in the North Maine woods. At first, he doesn't know why this has happened to him, but it turns out that all of the children that had been kidnapped and brought to the Institute have some kind of psychic powers, whether it be telekinesis or telepathy. And this group, this shadowy group who we don't really know, we're learning about, but we don't really know, they're trying to do experiments and to figure out these children's powers. So it's all about Luke and the other kids in the Institute and their efforts to survive what is happening to them. And it is so good. I will say the very first part of this book kind of had me scratch my head because it's about an entirely different character, an adult, and you're like, I thought this book was about kids being kept in some place out in the North Maine woods. What's going on here? But it will become clear. Stick with it, and you will need to know that first little bit in the beginning about the character that's being described there. And Stephen King is such a great storyteller. He really is. I mean, you may not like his style of writing for whatever reason, but I find that he can just tell a story. He's just a good storyteller. And so if you're looking for a book that's going to just keep you engaged and keep you wanting to turn the pages, and is a perfect book for the spooky time of year, I highly recommend The Institute. And then the last book I read is a science fiction book. I wanted to read more science fiction in September, as you remember. And so right at the end, I picked up, this is a reread for me, and this is a bind up of 2 novels. This is called Pilot's Choice, but it collects the 2 novels, Local Custom and Scout's Progress. And so these stories are set in the Liaden universe by Sharon Lee and Steve Miller. And this is a science fictional universe that they've been writing about for decades now. And these are space operas. So basically these are science fictional romance books. And I love them. They are, if you like Jane Austen, if what you like about Jane Austen is how watching the characters conform to and fight against the strictures that their society puts on them in terms of how people are supposed to act, and what polite society, how you're supposed to talk, how you're supposed to dress, how you're supposed to act, how you're supposed to move in the world, all of that stuff. If that's the part of Jane Austen's books that you like, I would highly recommend these books by Sharon Lee and Steve Miller, because that is the type of science fiction that she's writing. There is plot around this clan, this Corval clan, that's trying to protect its members from different outside baddies, if you will, but it's at its heart is about the relationship. So in the first book, Local Custom, the relationship that is at the center of that is Heir Tom, who is a dutiful son of Clan Corval, and then he meets a woman. He actually has had, he had sort of a short affair with a woman, and he can't get her out of his mind, and so he goes back to basically say goodbye to her before he's put into a contract marriage to benefit his clan. And of course, stuff happens to stop his contract marriage. And her name is Anne Davis, and she is a Terran, which is basically an Earth person. She's just a normal, what we would think of as a human from Earth. So it's her trying to deal with his very highly regulated customs, and him trying to deal with her not at all having the same level of customs to deal with. And it's very, very good. I absolutely love this story, and like I said, it's a reread for me of both of these. And then the second book is about the head of Clan Corval and his relationship with a woman named Aliana Kalin, and they're both pilots, and so that's how they meet, is some stuff having to deal with piloting spaceships. So just loved these. I just blew through them both, and like I said, if you like science fiction romances, highly encourage you to give Sharon Lee and Steve Miller a go. Anyway, that's the fiction that I read in the month of September that I hadn't already discussed. I hope that you were able to find some good fiction books to read in September. If you did, tell me about them down below. I'd love to hear about them. And I will talk to you later.